My name is Jayson, digital marketer in Los Angeles, and
Matt from Bangkok, Thailand. I'm also a digital marketer slash media buyer.
we are company growth partner. We are here to discuss some of the pains of trying to scale a coaching business. Why you might not be succeeding as a coach. We have a lot of experience working with coaches. We've helped coaches make their businesses very successful. And so we're here to share some of our ideas and strategies. Matt, just looking at our notes about this conversation, there was an idea that you wanted to discuss around the fact that a lot of coaches maybe aren't the most technical people.
Yeah, that'd be a good place to start for sure. So, many times what happens is that probably this causes the most pain when you're trying to scale your coaching business. You start the business with the idea of, I'm going to help people, I'm going to change the world, and I genuinely want to make an impact. Perfect. And the more you scale, right, and the more success you have, right, that comes with all types of bells and whistles. And usually those bells and whistles require a lot of technical knowledge around analytics, data, conversion rate optimization, digital marketing, and the two are, you cannot separate the two. It's impossible. It's impossible, right? And then, we could have like a whole conversation about something called attribution, knowing where your revenue comes from and the science around that. But the really what I want to drive home here is that you cannot really rely on your own technical capabilities to scale your coaching business, because that is going to come at the cost of coaching. And that's, as a coach, that's like the last thing you want. But then, and Jayson, you know this probably the most, like coaching is it's basically art,
Absolutely.
right? And then you take the art and you add the science, and then magic happens,
Exactly. But
right? But without the science, it's not a
right,
business.
you need to have the numbers, you need to have an interest in the numbers, or at least an investment in the numbers, if you're going to take a coaching passion and turn it into a successful business, which is something that we at Company Growth Partner have a lot of experience in doing. And I mean, oftentimes when we start working with these coaching businesses, we find that there's a real lack of strategy from the outset. I mean, we should definitely talk about the fact that strategy is key when it comes to taking your business to the next level, of course, but also when it comes to crafting any sort of a marketing campaign of any kind.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And let me explain like why this becomes a problem and why it's becoming a problem when you're running a coaching business. Coaching is such a new and nuanced thing that when you talk to a coach, like, okay, so how do you run a coaching business? It depends on what you want, right? So many times there are no set rules, and you make the rules up. But then more often than not, when you do that, and if you keep changing your mind, and you see another strategy or something, someone told you that, oh yeah, they're making 500,000, but actually you're on your way to $500,000 per month, and you just go and, oh, I'm just gonna switch and I'm just gonna do something else because that other guy told me. But then guess what? That other guy has zero idea about how to actually run his own business, because usually there's an operator doing that. Just like Elon Musk needs great operators to hold him back, because sometimes he just wants to kill that rocket project, and sometimes they have to tell him, Elon, calm down.
Yeah, you need operators to be there to help you implement strategy, because oftentimes coaches, to a point you made earlier when we were talking about this conversation and getting ready for it, you had mentioned that coaches oftentimes are feeling people, which is why they're often very good at being a coach, but that's also why they might not be the most strategic people when it comes to analyzing data and then implementing that information into concrete strategies that they can use to try to either get more clients or to build on the product they've already found success with, right?
Yeah, with one of our most successful clients, and I said this to you, Jayson, many times. I always saw black and white, and he saw all these, crazy colors and it's beautiful and it's great. But then in reality, when we were looking at sometimes at the numbers, a lot of changes had to be made in order to ensure that the coaching business is financially stable and viable, right? And that's sort of the balance you need to have in the business, because if you don't have that in place, you're going to be really stressed.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, you started to talk about the fact that this happens a lot, but you also have a fun name for it that I don't think you coined necessarily, but I think makes sense, calling it shiny object syndrome. The idea that a lot of coaches will be given a lot of differing pieces of advice by a lot of differing types of voices, and they will sometimes jump onto new ideas, especially when it comes to digital marketing opportunities, and that can oftentimes lead to problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have one phrase that I just want everyone to like tattoo on their arms. Basically, it's social contract. What I mean by that is that's a term coming from macroeconomics, from a very specific book called Mystery of Capital. Okay, so the idea is when you don't rely on your social contract, the social contracts that you kind of have with yourself, if you're taking the business in a completely different direction because that other coach told you so, they made those choices based on their personalities and what they're like as people, right? You gotta almost like orchestrate the business around what you're like as a person, because it's going to be an uphill battle. The other thing is, just because that person scaled up to that point, that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have problems. And more often than not, they're not going to tell you that they have all these other issues. And if you switch over to that specific model, that specific strategy, all the pains and all the issues are going to come with it. And guess what? More often than not, your strategy could be better, but you have to scale it up, and you have to make sure that you're not letting that go. If something works, don't turn anything off, anything at all.
I mean, I'm just looking at some of our notes for this conversation, and you've got this little chunk of information that just says tweaking things equals macro issues, which I think is what you're starting to touch on, which is this idea that, like, if you decide to just put your hands right into the dough and decide that it's not coming out the way that you thought it should, and you're just going to tweak it a whole bunch by tossing new ingredients in, you're probably not going to have very good bread at the end of the situation. Like, you can't just mix things up in the middle of the process. You've got to let things actually get to a point where you know how it's going to be if you were to try to scale it, right?
Yeah, I mean, to use like the dough example, so I decided that I want to make cookie, right? Because I love cookie, right? And then something is not working. This freaking dough is not a cookie yet. Okay, cool. Well, if it's not a cookie yet, then maybe there's something wrong with the dough. Or if you decide that you want to make cookie, and then halfway through the process, you decide, you know what? I just want a big ass loaf of bread. If you're going to change the process, add more ingredients, I don't know what the hell that's going to be, but it's not going to be a cookie or bread. It's going to be nothing, right? So you have to be careful, very careful. Like, make up your mind from the beginning. If something works, don't turn things off, right? Because that's exactly, like, you're going to have like a dough situation that, it's going to be very sticky, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to get out of it. Yeah, it's going to be yucky, right? And you
but
don't
we've
want
seen
that.
this a lot. I mean, we've seen this a lot in the coaching world, because what tends to be the trend is that you have a lot of coaching coaches. So the coaches are steeped in other coaches who are coaching them on how to coach, but also on how to do their business. And so they're constantly making new decisions on how they're going to approach maybe their coaching, but also how they're going to approach their marketing. And we talk about this in a different conversation, but consistency, as far as I'm concerned, as a branding expert, is very important. And oftentimes, if you start paying too much attention to the way that other creators are making things, it's very easy to decide that you need to start making things like them. But that's a huge problem, because whatever little bit of an audience you've already built is used to how you've been making things. They're now going to look at you trying to pretend to be somebody else, and they're going to be like, what is he do? This isn't what this person does. That's my thought on that.
The coach that we helped, okay, he worked with an extremely well-known coach. Everyone knows who he is. Like, probably if you're in coaching, you know who he is. And the person we helped started copying a lot of what this bigger coach does, right? The way he copied everything trickled down into how the business was managed from the very beginning. That's how he started the coaching business, right? But the problem was his personality, because he's actually a very loving and caring and feeling heavy person. But he was looking at this other coach. Oh, okay, like that style works, so it should work for me too. And that created this weird, there was something weird about it, right? It would have been cleaner if he just went, like, lean into his personality. Like, you know, like we had an amazing sales manager, you know, a great, extremely strategic setter. We had a great team in place in order to make sure that everything works perfectly. And
it was working. I mean, that's the other thing.
And it was working really well.
Yeah, really well.
We went from $100,000 in March to $300,000 in June. I know one person only, who can pull that off. And his name is Alex Ramosi. And he has a private equity firm. Just for everyone to understand, like, what we managed to pull off for this guy.
Which is not something, we're not private equity. We talk about this a lot. That's not really what our vibe is. Company growth partner isn't that. But if you're interested in a similar kind of help, some of the advice that we're talking about now, implementing some of the strategies that we offer other clients, you should send us a message. We'd love to help you.
You should send us a message. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd love to talk about your business and about how to take your business to 7 figures. Mm-hmm. We've seen massive success in terms of showing these types of coaches the ways that consistency and then also clear strategy can take their business to new heights. Often coaches aren't willing to stick to one strategy, right, for enough time to understand that it is what they've needed to get their business where they want to go. And it's actually that strategy that's truer to who they are as an individual that will ultimately help them scale to where they want to go as well. You can only copy to a point.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot copy because you can apply. I mean, look, you can literally grab some of the strategies that other people are doing. But do you know what's going to happen? You're going to have to alter the strategy. Why? So, for example, we're currently working with a coach in the finance space. Because he's targeting bookkeepers and accountants, we are getting a $60 cost per 1,000 impressions. That has an impact on how much we're paying for clicks. It's more expensive. That has an impact on what we can do for him because the audience is twice as expensive as in, let's say, the fitness space. We cannot just go and copy and paste a funnel. It's not going to work because the cost is going to be double.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, to the point we were talking about earlier, if we were to copy and paste other sales funnel ideas or other methods of getting messaging to new clients for each coach, if we were to copy and paste those exact things for each coach, it wouldn't work because coaching, this just builds on the initial point of this conversation. Coaching is in part a very individualized business. It's something that's very dependent on the coach itself. So we as digital marketers, you know, we understand that our needs are going to change with each client we work with. We're going to bend and adapt to who we see their initial avatar, their goal audience to be, who their cold traffic is and where to get them.
And honestly, like when we start working with a coach, we're looking at personality first, right?
Every time, yeah.
Is the person laid back or intense? And that's going to determine what we're building, right?
We change, yeah, depending on that factor alone, we change the approach almost entirely every time.
Every time. So there's no cookie cutter with us. Like, why? Because we understand that that doesn't work. And it usually doesn't work, right? Because it doesn't matter what you bought before. If it hasn't worked, it's probably because it got way too productized when they scaled it up. And they probably forgot to tell you that, oh, by the way, this actually doesn't work in every freaking niche. And for that specific reason, it's not necessarily a good idea to go for to buy any type of service that says, "Oh yeah, we have like this super system that can be applied to any coach." That doesn't work. The
Doesn't
economics
work.
don't pan out.
They don't
Doesn't pan
pan
out.
out. And oftentimes we've seen with coaching clients that they will adopt those strategies, those new ideas pretty quickly without thinking about the ways that it could trickle down and affect the business that they're already maintaining or trying to maintain. And you have this really wonderful little piece of advice, this golden nugget for any coach out there who's trying to run a successful business. Your suggestion to them, and I'm just going to read it the way you've written it here, is one channel, one avatar, one offer till 100K per month. So what do you mean by that? Why don't you just get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is actually something that came from a book written by Michael Masterson. And the idea is, if you start focusing on other products when you're below $100,000, you're going to end up creating something that I call operational drag, right? Your business is going to be way too complicated. And because your revenue doesn't pan out, you're not going to be able to hire the operational umph required to run the business at that capacity. So you should be able to, I mean, I know businesses that manage to scale to $100,000 with the founder and a video editor. And that is it. Maybe a couple of VAs to help out with like little admin tasks, but that's it. So the point is, I just want to make sure that everyone understands. You gotta have that dialed in. One avatar, one channel, and until $100,000, because it's going to make your life easier. That's the only reason why you should do it. And again, I know that a lot of people talk about this, especially Hormozy, but we actually have the data to prove that this is actually the real deal, right? Because this is how we're building long-lasting businesses.
This makes sense to me, and it makes sense for our clients eventually. Sometimes it takes a little time for us to get them to understand that, like I keep saying, consistency is key, right? But also that being specific, which is one of your major points with any client we work with, that as specific as we can get in terms of what that avatar is, what the channel is for that specific coach, right? What the offer ought to be for that specific avatar with that specific coach. We will do the work to help you identify those specifics, but it is your job as a coach to maintain those ideas and to stay consistent so that you can get to 100K per month. Then you can start to talk about getting a little more creative, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea.
If you can get to $100,000 per month, you can start introducing new offers, right? Then we can have a conversation about your back-end offer, right?
Yeah, right.
But until that point, if you're gonna start looking at some other coaches who have like, you know, some mastermind or council or whatever it's called, if you start slapping that on, oh boy, you need help. And you need to have some type of email strategy, some type of launch strategy in place in order to make sure that you actually close these people, right? And like, people like consistency as well. So if you keep changing your mind about these things, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It creates confusion, and then you're just going to make less money.
Mm-hmm. And then the operational drag that you started to talk about becomes an issue.
Yep.
Hey, if any of this sounds useful to you, you should send us a message at Company Growth Partner.
Yeah, send us a message, guys. Come on. Let's talk.